Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Inside LSU Baseball. I'm your host, Jason Armstrong, and got a good episode today. LSU was back on the field yesterday, starting their 3 weeks of winter workouts leading up to February 13th, opening day. And so we're going to tackle a topic today that I think is one of the most popular topics every single year. And it never fails. Every offseason, it's got to be the number one topic that's discussed in the lead up to opening day is the three-man starting rotation. It doesn't matter if it's on Twitter. If you go on Twitter, you're going to see people throwing around names of who's going to be the starting rotation. If Jay Johnson does an interview, it's a journalist asking him, who does it look like are going to be the three guys in the rotation? But as far as I'm concerned, this season is going to hinge far more on whether a true number two starter emerges than who takes the mound on Sunday. I'm far more concerned with LSU finding that Saturday starter. It's nice to have those three guys that make everything feel real settled. But, I'm going to kind of walk you through why it's so important to have that 1-2 punch and not so much a full rotation. Now, I'm not dismissing the value of having a full three-man rotation. There is a lot of security in knowing, who gets the ball each night or, of the 3-game series. It's just, I see that as a luxury. All right. Especially, and I'm talking about college baseball. That is a luxury. It's not a requirement. However, a solid 1-2 punch is an absolute necessity if you're gonna win in college baseball. All right. So in this episode, what I want to do is just look back on how Jay Johnson actually handles the starting pitching since he's been at LSU. We just got 4 years to go by. Show you how the bullpen directly impacts who fills those starting roles. Look at the blueprint that's worked for LSU, looking at their most successful seasons. I mean, they've all been successful, but and then bring it back to this current group of arms that LSU has, okay? And I'm going to also explain why we may be putting the cart before the horse with all of this weekend rotation talk, all right? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this now, that this number 2 ranked LSU team with all the talent, it is, well, I was going to say it's highly likely. I'll declare that they will not finish the year with the same starting rotation that they're going to start the season with. All right. And I don't even think that they're going to probably start conference play with the same rotation that they start the season with. And look, that is completely okay. Conference play is what matters. So, the season starts February 13th. I think April 13th, you have your first series against Vanderbilt. All right. And that is where, when everything really matters as far as having everybody, all the roles ironed out and things like, the best you can at least. So who gets the ball in February is just a starting point. You have to start somewhere. All right. And if it makes you nervous to see different combinations of starting, guys getting a chance to start, then this beginning of the season could be a stressful one. All right. So the first month of the season is strictly about identifying the guys that can fill those starting roles. And every year you're going to see guys that look like they're going to be a perfect fit. Wound up not being a great fit. I'm just thinking last year, Connor Ware coming out of fall and even maybe winter, he was like a slam dunk, one of the best, starting options. And it just never did happen, not even as a reliever for Connor Ware. But look, this first month, you're trying to figure out, first of all, who can extend, whose arm can handle being extended. Um, Also, who can face a lineup, go through the lineup multiple times, face it that third time? Who is able to show hitters one look early in the game and then still have something left, maybe a trick up their sleeve later on in the late innings when they really need to make a big pitch. These aren't things that you figure out in bullpens, okay? You solve them in real games. So guys are going to take their bumps and bruises. Who you are early is not who you are later in the year. It's just always the case. Looking back on the last few seasons, if we go back to the 2023 team was great. One of the great teams in college baseball history. That team opening weekend, their three starters were Paul Skeens, Riley Cooper, and Chase Shores. So by the time you got to conference play, Paul Skeens was the only one who was still starting. And think about this. Riley Cooper started game was a starter when you opened up the season. He goes on to be one of the best relievers LSU's had. That year, LSU won the championship, and they won 11 postseason games, okay, from regionals all the way to the World Series. Riley Cooper pitched in 7 of those 11 wins. In his 2 years, he led LSU in appearances both years. And again, this is a guy who was, starting game 2 behind Paul Skeens to open up the season. Funny enough, and if I asked you this, just based on sheer number of conference starts, who was your third starter that year in 2023? I doubt anybody would be able to pick it right. And it was Christian Little. Christian Little had 4 conference starts in 2023. And we don't see him that way. He was a reliever. 2024 opening weekend, you start off with Thatcher Hurd gets the ball game 1, Luke Holman, and then Javen Coleman. So Holman remained a mainstay in the starting rotation, but those other 2 guys were really found themselves in bottom of the pecking order, so to speak, as bullpen arms. Now Thatcher Hurd had some really good moments. But there was, for most of that year, they weren't. They were kind of phased out into bullpen arms. Nate Ackenhausen started the most games outside of your top 2 starters that year, and he had 3 starts in conference. Okay, last year, 2025, Jay gave Cade Anderson, Anthony Ianson, and Chase Shores the assignment of taming the mastodons of Purdue Fort Wayne on opening weekend. Now, we know about those first 2 names, but Chase Shores finished the year as one of the most feared closers in the country. So, look, this year, I mean, if I just base it on the last few years, I don't have any reason to believe that this year is going to be any different when it comes to that fluctuation and, the not really having a nailed down 3-man rotation. All right. And this is kind of where the conversation needs to shift just a little, because while the Tigers haven't had a consistent 3-man rotation, it has had consistency at the top, those first 2 spots. The last 3 years, LSU has had 2 starters who started all 10 conference games. So last 3 years, 2023, 2024, and 2025, you had the same guy Friday, Saturday night, right? 10 conference starts all 3 years. You're talking about in 2023, you've got Paul Skeens and Ty Floyd. They both started 10 conference games. Matter of fact, those 2 guys were 28-8 in games that they started throughout the course of the year. They gave you 112 SEC innings. Then 2024, and both of those guys, by the way, were first rounders. 2024, Gage Jump, Luke Holman, one of the really, really good 1-2 punches in all of college baseball. And I think we lose sight of that because of how badly that year started. But They were 21-10 as starters, gave you 108 SEC innings. Matter of fact, LSU went 10-2 down there. Their last 12 starts between Holman and Jump, they went 10-2 entering the postseason. That was a very good 1-2 punch, and you needed them to get things back on track. Last year, Cade Anderson, Anthony Ianson, 31-6 in games they started. They gave you 118 SEC innings. And look, they were one of the great 1-2 punches, maybe we've ever seen. You have to have two reliable starters if you're going to wind up back in Omaha and you're going to do big things. All right. It's just how it is. And so that's why I say, as everybody's talking about the starting rotation, I care a lot less about that than I do making sure LSU has two guys that can go out there and you can count on them week in and week out. There was a time when it would drive me nuts to see TBD next to a team's pitching rotation. All right. When the SEC would kind of release their newsletter or update their website and show you all the, for the weekend series in the SEC, who's starting, who's each team's three, starting pitchers. It would drive me nuts, and I would go, man, how can you not have three capable starting pitchers? I hated that. But after seeing how Jay, manages his staff, I'm actually not just fine with it. I almost, in certain ways, depending on the team, I see a big advantage in not locking those three guys, in locking those three guys in. So it's no secret also, this is something that Jay has said time and time again, is that every year he wants to have one of his best pitchers at the back end of the game. We really saw this on display in 2024 and then again last year. In 2024, LSU was absolutely awful in game threes, okay? So if I was trying to poke a hole in this argument that I'm making right now as far as like, hey, it's having a three-man rotation is not as big of a deal as two, I would point to 2024 when LSU went 2-8 in Sunday games in SEC play. 2-8. And guess what? Of the 8 losses, 4 of them were by 10 runs. That is pitiful. All right. And the whole time you had arguably one of the best relievers in all of college baseball, and Griffin Herring, that many were like, hey man, let this guy start. We'll stop losing on Sundays if we can use Griffin Herring. All right. And I don't think that they're necessarily wrong. It's just you got to kind of look at the whole picture. All right. It's why I said the bullpen really dictates who your starters are. Go back to last year. There were times, Connor Ware was given a couple of SEC starts, and you were just kind of hoping he'd go out there and get you some innings when, you could easily to start the weekend penciled in Zach Cowan or Kason Evans as that third starter. And they did use Kason Evans at time. And honestly, I was kind of against it. Even though he had a great first start, I think it was against Tennessee. He started, I think, 3 games, Tennessee, Arkansas, and I think A&M. And one of them was really good, and just 2 were just kind of okay. But I didn't love it because of the value that he brought as a reliever. I mean, by using your top bullpen guy as a game 3 starter, you're drastically impacting your ability to win on Friday or Saturday night. And look, every win is so important. So why would you hold a guy if you're up, 3-1 in the 7th inning on a Friday night? Why would you not say, hey, bring this guy in to get me, 2 1/3 or 2 2/3 innings, and let's get out of here with the win? Why would we not do that to be able to, if we know he's a dude, right? To be able to say, well, we're going to have him go game 3. What if you lose game 1 and game 2? So I'm just a big fan of saying, hey, you're going to win. You win the games that you can. All right. And so that's just kind of my thoughts on that, is that you have to be careful. And every team is just a lot different. Depending on the type of arms that you have, gives you more flexibility as far as like, hey, can you afford, if you got one really good bullpen arm, you just can't afford, you can't afford to move him out of the bullpen and put him as a starter, in my opinion. Okay. So look, where does that leave us in 2026? Okay. Where does that leave this team? Well, there's good news, and I think that there's some uncertainty. The good news is that I've already illustrated you have to have two reliable frontline starting pitchers, okay? So the good news is that you're halfway there, because Case and Evans is every bit of a Friday night frontline SEC ace, okay? He just is. And I understand that you could say, well, he was a reliever last year. He was an All-American reliever last year, but this is a big difference. This is a big change, and I get that. But believe it or not, LSU starts this year in better shape than they were last year, because you entered last year banking on Cade Anderson, who had only thrown 3 1/3 innings his freshman year. Okay. And in those 3 1/3 innings, he allowed 10 earned runs and 12 hits. All right. You were banking on him to be your Friday night guy, your stud. Okay. So while Casey Evans is not proven as an SEC starter, even though he started some games and he's given you extended innings, he is what they are supposed to look like in this league. Okay. And look, on a side note, because I'll start by saying this. If Casey Evans isn't, I'm just assuming he's a dude on Friday night. If he's not, then you're in trouble regardless, because you have to have that is not something that LSU, not only has LSU had, a stud ace for the last 3 years, they've had a stud number 2. Okay. I just outlined that. Ty Floyd, gets drafted in the first round. Luke Holman was pick number 73. I think Gage Jump at 71. Both of those guys were like in that second round, compensation round. And then last year, Anthony Ianson, he didn't go until the third round, but he was so much better than that. There wasn't a better 2 in all of America. Okay. So not only has LSU had a stud ace, they've had 2 great 1-2 punches every year. Okay. So that's a given, is you got to have Case and Evan be a dude. As I look around the SEC this year, and if I just go by like if you have questions about Case and Evans, I guess that'd be fair, but also, Perfect Game just put out their preseason all-conference team. And if you look at the pitchers that are on this list, their starting pitchers are Liam Peterson, Gabe Gackle from Arkansas, Hunter Elliott from Ole Miss, who's in like his 8th year, Joey Volchko from Georgia. I mean, you're talking about a lot of guys these are like guys with good stuff, but last year, let me put it like this. Last year at this time, you were talking about, SEC aces like Ryan Prager, who led A&M to the college, the finals the year before. He was incredible, turned down a lot of money to come back to college. J.D. Thompson from Vanderbilt was a very good left-handed. He was good, clearly stepping into that ace role. Pico Khan from Mississippi State. Kyson Witherspoon. I mean, what did he go like number 14th overall in the draft? Arkansas is rolling out there with Zach Root, who had been a proven starter at East Carolina the year before. You can even say Liam Doyle. Nobody knew he was going to be that good, but entering the year, he had already kind of showed what the step he had made from his year at Ole Miss. But my point is, it wasn't like a lot. You could bank on these guys were going to be stud aces. I mean, looking at it this year, if you're questioning Case and Evans, I mean, you could question all of these guys. Liam Peterson is extremely talented, one of the top right-handed pitchers that's going to be in this draft, the Florida ace. But like, he's a guy that's at times is, you know, is it's more stuff than pitchability. Okay, Gabe Gackle was, after being an All-American closer 2 years ago as a freshman, he really struggled last year, you know, trying to lock down one of those starting roles, and he was relegated to being a reliever once again at the end of the year. LSU saw him in the World Series. He pitched like 6 innings and struck out like everybody and their mama, but it was in relief. But when he started, he didn't do well. You know, Hunter Elliott was great as a freshman in 2022, led Ole Miss to a national championship. Him and oh my goodness gracious, was it Dylan? Oh Lord, I'm drawing a blank. They were great. They were the reason Ole Miss won that year. But you know, he had injury and he tried to come back in 2024. Still dealt with injury. Last year he was good, but like, you know, I don't know that I'm betting the house on him being a all conference pitcher. And then Joey Volchko, this is somebody that at Stanford, I don't think he ever had an ERA under 5, probably even over that. I think it was in the 6s. Incredible stuff. First round type of guy, but like, he hasn't done it yet. Okay. Matter of fact, LSU is after him, you know, this summer, and he wound up going to Georgia. But again, so and Case and Evans is on this list as a reliever, you know, for perfect games, all conference, preseason, all conference team. But my point is that if you have questions about Case and Evans, then you should be questioning all these guys, because I don't see anybody coming back that's like a slam dunk short thing based on previous experience. Okay. That's my point there. All right. Now, so the big question is, does LSU have that typical 1-2 punch? All right. Who is going to follow Case and Evans? Now, LSU has a lot of guys that they hope can fill that role, but it is a real question mark. And look, you're not going to meet anybody that's higher on this LSU team than me. I think they just have so much talent everywhere. But if there is one place that I would say it's fair as at this point to question them, I would say it's the starting pitching, okay? Which I think it's like that every year, to be honest with you. Very seldom do you like bring back a guy who just started, you know, 15 games for you the year before. Just doesn't happen a lot. But look, so this is so important that we find out that we find a second starter, all right? If it's one of the returning arms, somebody who was on this LSU team last year, it's going to require a real improvement from last year and a substantially larger role. You don't have anyone who started a conference game outside of Case and Evans last year, believe it or not. Not one. You've got some guys you started in the conference tournament and in the postseason here and there, but like you don't have a starter that did that. So who are some of the candidates? Okay. I mean, look, we've heard a lot about William Schmidt. William Schmidt, though, had a 27 ERA over 5 appearances in SEC play last year. Okay. He was great in non-conference in the midweek, but in SEC play, he walked 11 in 2 innings. Okay. So again, if it's going to be William Schmidt, which a lot of people think it is, and look, I'm all for it, it's going to take a huge jump. Now, I thought this was interesting because some of the like 2027 draft projections and rankings are coming out for guys, not that are going to be in the draft this year, but the following year. And, you know, they've got William Schmidt even ranked ahead of Case and Evans, which is crazy because you got one guy who's an All-American last year, pitched in all kind of big moments, and then a guy who pitched in the midweek, still had a good freshman year. But like, you know, and look, I had somebody that was at, not at the scrimmage, but last week where they were just kind of doing live at bats. Schmidt was just throwing 97 like it was nothing. And this is like cold weather, you know, so I'm really excited about William Schmidt. So I think that that's a good, option. But again, we have questions. We need to see somebody fill it. Okay. Now, Cooper Williams you will not find anyone, okay, that has been higher on Cooper Williams than me. And this is a guy that was a big-time recruit. He was signed to go to Texas A&M after Jim Schlossnagle left to go to Texas. LSU wound up getting him committed, okay? Very good stuff. He really has a good changeup. We didn't see it a ton last year because I think he struggled at times with his command. But look, this is a guy that it all starts with the fastball. He gets a little breaking ball happy, but he's somebody that, just like Schmidt, he did not pitch in summer ball. He went off and worked on some very specific things. And, this is a guy who's like, a 6'4" lefty, 200 pounds. That is a very good option. But in 9 SEC outings last year, he averaged an out and a half per outing. Think about that. He came in the game 9 times and he didn't throw more than 4 innings. So he's got a long way to go if he's going to step into that number 2 role behind Case and Evans. Now, Jaden Newt started in Hoover and looked really good against Ole Miss. His start wasn't great against Little Rock in the regionals, okay? But we saw Jaden Newt start in midweek games. And Jaden Newt was one of the really, really high school recruits that was in that famous class of 2022 that LSU got, the class that had, Jared Jones and Brady Neal and Chase Shores. Jaden Newt was like the number, 30 recruit in the entire country, entire class. He was the number 1 right-handed pitcher out of California, number 3 overall. He had Tommy John, missed his freshman year. Then he tried to come back late in 2024. He pitched against Vanderbilt, and he gave up a bomb. He got maybe 3 outs, but he wasn't ready. Last year, we really saw some good things out of him. And I think that he has a very, very special, I think it's a split finger he throws that a lot of guys don't see. They're not used to it. And so he's got multiple pitches that can go through a lineup, many times. But again, this is a guy, I think he can do it. He's a great candidate, but he's going to have to, that's a much bigger role that he's going to be stepping into. I know a lot of people talk about Zach Cowan. Zach Cowan has been a starter before at Wofford. He had some longer relief outings last year. We're never going to forget the start that he turned in Omaha against Arkansas. That was such an important start, and he showed us what he is capable of. He made 20 appearances last year, okay? 22, I'm sorry. 20 of them, the first 20 were relief appearances. His last 2 were starts. One against Little Rock did not go well at all, and then the one against Arkansas that went incredibly, incredibly well. So, what's different about this year than last year that would maybe allow Zach Cowan to be in a starting role? I think last year the circle of trust got really small as the season went on, and Zach Cowan was on pace for a historic year out of the bullpen. And so I know he had some struggles, but he was too valuable to put in one of those roles. This year, I think your strength is your bullpen. So maybe you've got, more, but we'll see. I mean, he doesn't really look like an SEC starter, and then maybe a Sunday start, I guess, in that third role, but as a number 2 guy, he's throwing 91, 92. I mean, outside of Connor Finnell for Vanderbilt, you're used to seeing guys with serious stuff that you're talking about. Your number 2 is going to be trying to match up with the guys, the likes of, who are some of the other, number 2 starter. If you think back to last year, you're talking about Jacob Morrison, right? From Coastal, Aiden King from Florida, some really big time number 2 guys with really good stuff. And so that's who you have to match up with. So I'm not saying he can't do it. He's going to have to develop a third pitch. He gets very changeup happy. But all I'm doing right now is just kind of giving some options. Now, of the transfers, and probably the best candidate for that number 2 role that you're going to be really counting on somebody filling is going to be Cooper Moore. Cooper Moore started 14 games at Kansas last year. what's even more impressive to me is that in the Big 12, Kansas was a good team last year, a very good team. And the Big 12 is a good conference. He started 8 games. 4 of his 8 starts went 8 innings. He completed 8 innings. He had 2 other starts where he went 7 innings. So 6 of his 8 conference starts were at least 7 innings, with the majority of those being 8 innings. That is like serious durability, stamina, and just think about what kind of position that puts you in when you can roll your second starter out there that can give you that type of, get you that deep into a game. It just sets everything up. It helps with your bullpen, sets you up for game 3 if it's a rubber match that you got to take the series. So that is very impressive. Now, he's got some good off-speed stuff. He's not going to wow you with the fastball, and he's not going to spin a slider that's over 3,000 RPMs, but he's a very good pitcher. He throws a lot of strikes. He's feisty. I like that. He's a very good competitor. All right. So, he could be a very good candidate for that. I don't know that I would put, Marcos Paz or Reagan Ricken in that mix yet as freshmen. Are they good enough? Are they going to one day be? Most likely? And we could see later in the year where Paz is. Who knows? But early on, I'm just kind of giving some. And there's more guys. All right. There's other guys I didn't even mention. But those are the guys that I see more as fitting possibly those starting roles. But look, there's a lot still to happen. All right. I think this is a very deep pitching staff with loads and loads of arms. I really do. Where the bullpen is a real strength, I do think the rotation remains a question as I sit here today. And that's why I say, while we're all, all the debates are going around about the weekend rotation, LSU better find a number 2, all right? Which is why the next 3 weeks are so vital, all right? LSU starting back to, with their 3 weeks of scrimmages and inter-squad games before they start the season February 13th against Milwaukee, Wisconsin, all right? So, I'm going to be keeping a very, very close eye on, the LSU baseball data and, as they post kind of the different stats for each scrimmage and just, watching the press conferences and hearing what Jay's saying about this guy and that guy, because I'm fascinated. I don't think it's something that enough people are talking about when it comes to the starting pitching rotation. Look, the 3rd spot is going to evolve. It always does, all right? However, the season will hinge on who steps into that number 2 role. So just something to think about. Look, as always, I appreciate you guys joining me so very much. And we will be back here all throughout the next couple weeks with updates and just getting you ready for the start of the season that's right around the corner. Hope you guys have a great day, and thanks as always for joining me.